Here we go. Everything you need to know about 1984, Part 2, Chapter 1. Part 2, Chapter 1 starts the second of three parts of the book, right? Part 1 really is about establishing the setting. It's this oppressive, all-encompassing police state that's all about the presence and the power of the party. It also develops Winston's character as a discontent, free-thinking rebel, I guess, seeking to understand the real truth. He wants to escape the iron grip of the party's control. He wants physical and intellectual freedom. The events of this chapter now take us in a new, unexpected direction, and it really justifies why this is called Part 2. Keep in mind, though, that chapter numbers do restart at the beginning of Part 2 and Part 3, so you have to be careful to say Part 2, Chapter 1, 2, and so on, so we know where we're at in the book. So the chapter starts with Winston at work, and he has to go potty. So in the hallway, he sees the girl with the dark hair coming towards him, and he has not seen her for 4 days since they ran into each other outside of the junk shop where he wasn't supposed to be. He notices, though, at this point her arm is in a sling, and he thinks that she might have been hurt on a machine in the fiction department, which is where she works. When she's close to him, she trips and falls and cries in pain, but looks fearful to him. So he sees her as an enemy, but as also now someone who's in pain, so he stops to help her up. She holds out her hand, gets up, says she's fine, thanks him, and then just walks on. This all happened in like 30 seconds, but he had to hide this reaction of surprise to the telescreens which were watching because she had put something in his hand when she was getting up. So in the bathroom, he puts his hand in his pocket and discovers that this folded piece of paper, and he believes that the bathroom stalls are watched by the telescreens, so he can't read it in the bathroom. So he has to figure out when and where he can read it. So back at his desk, he has to talk himself into waiting at least 5 minutes to read it so it seems natural in case he's being watched. He has two thoughts. Maybe this is a political message. One source would be the thought police, but he can't think, why would the thought police communicate through a scrap of paper through this girl? But he doesn't know anything about the thought police, so who knows? But he also has this thought that maybe it's the Brotherhood trying to communicate to him, but he has no reason to think this. Even though he's hopeful about it, he tries to dismiss this thought. Doesn't want to get too excited about it. He gets through a patch of work and then starts on a second stack, but puts the note on top to make it look like it's part of the work that he's going to do. The note says, "I love you." Now, of course, this blows his mind. He's super agitated and distracted, so he hopes to sit by himself at lunch and try to think through this, but he has to suffer through lunch with Parsons, who comes and sits down and talks about Hate Week. He's distracted for the afternoon while he's back at work with some forgery work that he has to do, and then he goes and suffers through a night at the community center until he can actually think when he's in his bed, because he knows that that's where the only place you can be quiet and hidden from the telescreens at night. So Winston realizes, although he's been resigned to being killed by the thought police, with this note he actually wants to live. He knows being alone with her ever is a huge difficulty. How's that going to happen? Even though he wanted to kill her a couple days ago, now he wants to be with her. He thinks through all the ideas that he could possibly go through to meet up with her, and there's not going to be another hallway accident. He can't send a letter. He can't wait around and follow her. Basically, he can't do anything that's out of the norm and would attract attention. So he thinks maybe in the cafeteria, if there's a lot of people around and talking, he can sit near her and get a few words in. So day after day for a week, one thing or another makes it so he can't sit by her. She's not there. She's sitting with people. Someone sits with him. One day they both arrive early and he heads to her table at lunch, but a little man in front of him looks like he's headed to sit with her at the same table. Somehow, we don't know how, he trips or is tripped and drops everything on the floor, and Winston sits with the dark-haired girl at her table. Since it's been a week, right, he's really actually afraid that she's changed her mind. So before someone sits down, he gets the nerve to ask, where can we meet? So she tells him that, we can connect in a crowd at Victory Square tonight, but to only come up with her if she's around, come up to her when she's around other people, and when he does, don't look at her, right? Nothing to draw attention. So he arrives early and eventually sees her reading a poster. At the sound of this bunch of vehicles going by, a whole crowd runs over and gathers to watch this procession of vehicles, and he wiggles into a spot next to her. right? They both stand like shoulder to shoulder as truck after truck goes by, and these trucks are full of war prisoners. They're all looking sad, they're all chained up, but he is now next to the dark-haired girl. She gives him very specific instructions to meet out in the countryside on Sunday afternoon, right? She tells him this very detailed route that he has to remember and then follow in order for them to get together. She then tells him, now that you know this, move away. And they're so jammed together that he can't leave right away, and they stand there as more prisoners are driven by, and they get to hold each other's hand. It's like 10 seconds before they part, but to Winston it feels like a long time. So what should we get from this chapter? Really, we see, how what we think is not a big deal, which is nothing to us, is a lengthy and complicated ordeal that carries great risk with it. We think nothing of talking to someone, a coworker or a friend, and asking them on a date or meeting up with them. But since everything is controlled by the party, and any deviation risks possible prison or torture or death, simply passing off the note as the woman did in the hallway is dangerous. Also of interest is the disconnect and lack of compassion for fellow human beings, right? Although one-on-one in the hallway, Winston does sympathize with the pain of the young woman that she's experiencing from her fall. When he's meeting with her in the public square, he's very self-consumed. There's no feelings for the hundreds of prisoners who are surely being transported to their deaths. All he can focus on is his own feelings. It's really contradictory in terms of a backdrop, right? Winston and Julia are making plans to meet and have some sort of relationship, but it's done in front of hundreds of prisoners heading towards prison or detainment centers and quite possibly execution. So in this dystopia, anything hopeful, anything potentially beautiful is a risk. It's dangerous. It could lead to death. And it's always contrasted in this stark and dark backdrop that they live in. Questions or comments? Anything about this chapter that still puzzles you? Leave those down below. I'd be happy to hear from you and respond. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I hope this helped.